I learned about this thing called the Milgram experiment, which I'm sure you've probably heard of. I'll give you a quick recap. And if you have an editing team, you should put some like replays over this. If that doesn't happen, I apologize. But so I'll give you a quick recap. It's I think 1972. We're at the Yale University in this big brick building called Lindsay Chapman Hall, and they run this ad in the paper. It says, "We're doing a study on learning. Come participate in this ad, and we'll give you like a free sandwich or a lunch voucher or something." So these regular civilians line up. These are not college students. And they're told, like, if this person gets a wrong answer on the test, this dude is on the other side of this wall. You've already met him, but he's locked in this room right beside you. If he gets a wrong answer on this little test, you hit this button and deliver a shock. If he gets another one, you drag this little voltage thing to the right and hit the button again, shock him again, and keep going and keep going. So throughout this whole time, people are screaming through the wall. They can hear this guy screaming. And all there is just a guy behind them at a desk in a lab coat. No one's got a gun to his head. So they get up to 200 volts. They get up to 300, 500, and I think over 450 or something like that. There's a button that says XXX, danger, severe shock. And by this point, the guy in the room is not making any more sound, and he's not answering questions anymore.
He's playing dead.
Yeah. And these people, they keep going. And this guy in the lab coat's like, well, any non-answer should be treated as an incorrect answer. So increase the voltage and go again, please. The experiment must continue. It's important that you continue for the experiment. And they go up. And before this experiment took place, these psychologists got together and psychiatrists and said, how many people are going to go through with this?
They predicted it. They made a
hypothesis. And they said, well, anybody who would do this, it's got to be sadistic to begin with. Maybe there's some psychopathy going on. We predict 0.1%. I'm estimating, but that's about what it was, less than 1%. And 0.1 will go all the way to XXX, danger, severe shock. And 67% went that far. 67%. And 200, 250 is enough to kill you. 100% went to that level.
Everyone.
100%. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe it's because of the lab. Maybe they knew it was safe, so they replicated it in the basements of apartment buildings, and they replicated the experiment again with women and men and people of different IQs, different backgrounds.
In prisons.
In prisons, yeah. And it got the same results. And it's not, and when I talk to sales teams, I say, what will be harder, selling a car or talking a random stranger into committing murder? And you only have 40 minutes to do either one. They're like, oh, well, selling a car is a lot easier. I'm like, okay, you're worried about sales scripts. Show me the sales scripts in the Milgram experiment. Where's the scripts? There are no scripts. There's no magic words. There's not hypnosis going on. There's not some NLP technique that somebody's using, which is why I think authority and presenting a perception of authority gives people a sense of safety and a sense of agency. Like I am an agent on behalf of this person in authority, which is exactly what we saw with Trump when he was shot at. And when we are in the presence of somebody with authority, we go a long way and kind of do whatever. And there's no secret script. So I would argue that if you can make a person feel like a person the Milgram experiment felt, and you have all the linguistics and language, and you have the charisma on top of that, and you can read them, and you know exactly what they need to hear, you have an admin password to human beings.
You're like a human hacker.
Yeah.
So I think the lab coat sales are going up right now. Everyone's like, okay, I just need a lab coat. Yeah. I'll make more money in my business. Would you say that's the number one thing to hack a human being is authority?
Authority is number one, yes.
Why?
If we go back like 200,000 years ago, we faced immediate danger most often when we disobeyed the tribal authority people. So if I just want to influence a person's mammalian brain, and just as an experiment, when I talk about this, I just want you to think about dog training. How do I train a dog? Okay, I just want you to think this isn't human. I'm just talking about dog. Can you train a dog if the dog is not focused on you?
When he's not focused on you? No.
No. So, number one, focus. If you're letting the dog be in charge, can you train it? Okay, so number two is authority. If the dog sees itself as an outcast and not part of your family and has to live outside and is not ever invited into any social environment, will the dog attach to your family? No. So tribe. Tribe is next. And if you don't repeat these things to where the dog memorizes them and experiences pleasure from doing what you're training the dog to do, will they repeat the action? No. And that's emotion. So those four things are what need to be triggered for a human being's mammalian brain to become compliant. So when we're talking about the lower area of our brain, we have the limbic system and all the way back to kind of the brain stem. These are what make us compliant as a mammal.
What are they again?
Focus, authority, tribe, and emotion, in that order. So if you just look at the Milgram experiment, I told you about focus. Novelty manufactures focus. When we're around something new or somebody says something new to us that we haven't heard before, that we didn't expect, our brain says focus. Our ancestors, when they're walking by a bush and they hear a stick snap, they have 100% of their focus on it. They're not thinking about their tribe, their kids, no matter what's going on. They're just focused on the novelty. And is it a rabbit that I can eat, or is it a tiger that's going to eat me? So when we hear novelty, our brain goes to focus. And the moment our brain goes to focus, it goes to, is that a potential threat or is it potential value? Does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
So in the Milgram experiment, if we just go back to that for 1 second, if I'm talking too much, I want you to stop me.
Go ahead.
Okay.
This is money.
So in the Milgram experiment, let's say Leon's a volunteer for the Milgram experiment. You show up, you answer a newspaper ad you've never answered. You show up to a building you've never been in. You meet a person that you've never met, in a room that you've never been in before, sitting in front of a shock machine that you've never seen, administering a test you've never heard of in your life, hearing screams from behind a wall, an experience which hopefully you've never gone through before. Every single part of that experiment was novelty that generated focus. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So they never talk about this. They never talked about this novelty being a prerequisite for authority to really take hold. So the novelty made focus, and focus is the gateway that opens up for authority. Mm-hmm. Once authority opens up, then we have tribe.
The novelty thing and the focus also reminds me of just interrupting someone's pattern.
Yeah.
When they're in an autopilot and just grabbing their attention, whether it's on social media or it's in person, or when you're trying to influence someone and they're in a loop and they're doing the same old habits or patterns, and you just got to demand focus.
Yeah.
If you want to influence them by interrupting that pattern.
Yeah, like somebody's complaining and all of a sudden really loudly you're like, hey, do you like pineapples on pizza? Like just weird, like they have no ability to predict what you're going to say. So novelty is, and focus, I would just say focus,
mm-hmm.
is so important. Like, can you generate enough focus? And if you can, then you need the authority piece. And that you don't have to be an authority. It's the perception of authority. You're talking about lab coats. Just going on Amazon and buying a $3 orange reflective vest and like a walkie-talkie will do just about the same. And they do these experiments. One of them was done by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. He has a YouTube channel called the Heroic Imagination Project, which shows you all of these cognitive biases in action. They go test it out with cameras and stuff. Then he encourages you to say, how would you act? Would you fall victim to X, Y, and Z? So it's such a great channel. I can't recommend it enough. And Philip Zimbardo is also the doctor who ran the Stanford Prison Experiment, which you referenced earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a YouTube series as well, or a YouTube genre, you could say, where they just carry a ladder into a place to get in for free.
Yeah.
When you carry a ladder with enough certainty, you can just walk into any zoo or movie theater because you're probably there for a reason, and no one's going to interrupt you there. So,
and we tested this. I was at the Human Hacking Convention back in the day, and if you go to Office Depot first, and they sell like these carbon copy forms that you can just pick up, like a return slips and stuff. And you pick up a work order. They have a blank just work order form. and you pick one of those up and just fill it out with the building name that you want to get into, it 10x's your ability to get into a building.
Yeah, I don't question it. There's a YouTuber who snuck into the like a security conference, which is funny because it's like there's a lack of security there, and his name badge said Rob Banks. Max Fosh is the creator. So authority, just asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Not that I'm interested in this myself. How would one develop authority to influence people and manipulate them and do whatever you want?
Authority has 5 components. When it comes to like who and what,
I don't want to know about this. Is just my friend who asked about this. So.
Yeah. We'll tell him I said hello. And so when we teach like what authority actually means, we teach that it has 5 components. And authority is comprised of confidence, discipline, leadership, gratitude, and enjoyment. And I have a rating system that will help you rate yourself from 1 to 5 on all of those characteristics. I'll give it to you that you can put in the show notes or the description if you want to.
Mm-hmm. And this is a rating system you actually use for training
Jason Bourne dudes. Yeah.
What do they need that for?
They are, if you're looking at this intelligence kind of guy, they need to have this authority because part of their job is either interrogating people, which requires a tremendous amount of authority, or talking people into doing stuff that may not be in their best interest.
For example,
providing intelligence against their own country. And you have to talk them into doing this, which the side note of that is I need you to face the death penalty potentially for doing what you're going to do for me, which is a big deal. And if we get them leveled up, and this is authority, it's called the authority inventory, and it's 8 or 9 pages long. But we take everyone that I work with, whether they're government, police, Army PSYOPs operatives, all of them have to go through this authority assessment. And what this assessment does is it shows you where any of the weak spots are, like where your highs and your lows. And if you just bring that low up, you do more than anything of like, well, I need to work on my confidence. Well, that might be a 4, but your discipline might be a 2. And if you and I, we've both been at a party, a wedding or something where we put a suit on and all that. And back home, there's like a 4-foot pile of laundry and our bathroom counter's just covered in shit. And there's like a part of our brain that reminds us like, I am not portraying myself accurately. I'm trying to portray a different image than who I am. And that level of cognitive dissonance causes people not to see you as an authority figure. And that's just the discipline side of that.
So confidence, discipline, leadership,
gratitude,
and enjoyment.
Yeah.
These 5 things. So what I'm hearing is even the small things that we do at home, credit card payment that we're late on, even that we carry with us into everyday interactions.
Yeah.
And that's noticeable to people.
Yeah. So when it comes to off camera, like who am I off camera? There's 5 more elements to this, which is how do I manage my environment, which is like, do I have French fries under my driver's seat that have been there for 8 months? My time, my appearance, like if one question that we have in the appearance assessment, and this authority thing assesses all of this, appearance would be, how would a stranger rate my diet on a 1 to 10 if they just looked at me across a room?
Based on how I look.
Just based on how I look, yeah. How would they rate my diet and my lifestyle? So it's appearance, social, and financial. So your social skills and how do you manage your money. So just like what you said, these unpaid bills, that tends to leak out through our body.
I guess these are all part of discipline.
These are all part of the authority triangle.
Mm-hmm. And one of the components of authority is discipline.
Yeah.
So for me, the way I categorize that is all underneath that discipline piece and self-mastery, which you mentioned.
Yeah, and the first video of yours that I ever watched, probably before you saw any of me, was a dopamine detox video that you did. You were talking about discipline a lot. And I want to give you a hack that maybe you can use and try it out. How does reading all this research and stuff on dopamine detox translate to your mammalian brain? Because your mammalian brain does not speak English at all. It cannot speak a language. So when I'm training operatives or clients, just one-on-one clients, I'm always thinking of how could I make this person understand this at a mammalian level? How could I teach this to a dog? So how would I make discipline important to a dog? And in our mammalian brain, the one thing that we really need to think about is imagery. We're visual creatures. We don't have a relationship with our future self. And the way that I define discipline is my ability to prioritize my future self ahead of my present self. So future me is more important than me right now. So I'm always, if you have discipline, you're looking backwards with gratitude. You're looking forwards with concern. So how do I get my brain to start understanding that concept? And what I will do with these clients is there's an app, I can't remember the name of it. There's an app on your phone that can make you look like 90 years old. Have you seen these things? That can age your face. They'll kind of make you a little bald and wrinkly. And so I'll have them use this app, print that out, and hang it in like 10 places in your house so that every single day you're developing a relationship with this older version of yourself. And what do you do after like 1,000 repetitions? You're shopping for like a Honda Accord, and you finally buy a Honda Accord, and what happens? Like, they're everywhere. But you didn't tell your brain to look for those cars. Your brain learned it through repetition and exposure. So that you're doing the exact same thing, except on purpose and not on accident. The Honda Accord thing is an accident. The hanging old version me, pictures all over the place, is definitely on purpose. So we're using the mammalian brain systems. This is the VTA for your Uncle Huberman, the ventral tegmental area, which goes into this like a reticular formation that helps us to recognize things that the brain says, hey, Leon thinks that thing is important because he's been showing it to me a lot. Not talking. He's been showing it to me a lot, so I'm going to go look for it. That's when we recognize cars, because of our visual cues, repetition. So that helps us to develop a relationship with our future self. And that was a humongous tangent that I just went off on. So
that's interesting. I want to put a pin in that, because that sounds like brainwashing yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It also reminds me of vision boards and all that stuff that a lot of people, they get flagged for because they think it's woo-woo, but there's something to it. I believe in it. Same thing as visualization. So I want to put a pin in that, and let's revisit that. So the 5 components: confidence, discipline, leadership, gratitude, and enjoyment.
Yeah.
How would one go about increasing that, each of them, to increase authority and therefore influence and our, effectiveness in social situations? So let's start with confidence.
If I was to sum up confidence in like one sentence that no one's ever heard, but that makes the most amount of sense, is a willingness to be socially injured. Just a full openness to social injury.
Vulnerability.
Yeah. To where I'm no longer really concerned with that level of thing. And the way that I describe confidence is, let's say that the average person makes, $60K a year. And if that person were to walk into like a super expensive, like a department store or something like Hermes, I think is super crazy expensive. If they walked into a Hermes, they're going to see maybe their cheapest bag, I'm guessing, is like 14 grand, 15 grand. They're going to walk in there and think that right as they walk in, they're going to think they're being judged. And they've proven this, that even a neutral facial expression walking into that store will look judgmental. Just someone looking like this will look like, oh, that bitch is judging me. So it feels judgmental. And then they walk in, they look at the price, they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. They're looking at all these price tags. And then an employee comes over and says, oh, hey, can I help you find anything? You're like, no, I'm fine. Then you're thinking like, oh, she knows. She can tell. She knows I can't afford anything. She's a bitch. I bet you it majored in art history. Then you're like going in all this crazy stuff in your head. And you take the same person. Let's say I talk to them beforehand, and I give them my company platinum card. I hand it to them and say, hey, go down to the Hermes store. Please do me a favor. I have a client coming into town. I want you to buy the nicest briefcase that they have. I don't care how much it is. Just swipe the card. Give me the nicest briefcase. It's the same person wearing the same clothing with the same haircut, no extra hair gel, no different makeup. Nothing's different. And they walk in there way different. Their posture is different. They make better eye contact. The employee comes up to them and they don't see judgment. They're like, yeah, actually help me find that briefcase. I want like the best briefcase you've got. And they're very comfortable. And the only thing that changed is that platinum card, which nobody can see that. Those employees don't know that it's sitting there in that person's pocket. So what confidence really is assigning ourselves a role. The only thing that changed was a role, and the role changed something called permission.
So it's not actually the money that's on the surface. What's underneath that is what matters, which can be applied to anything, which is just permission.
Yeah, permission. Everything with confidence is about permission.
Meaning, am I allowed to be here? Am I allowed to act this way?
Right. Because that's our fear. Like we talked about earlier, I'm gonna get judged by the tribe if I act in a way that I'm not supposed to act. I'm gonna get punished.
Is there an authority here that will punish me for this behavior?
Right.
Interesting.
Right. So now, if you can imagine, 99.9% of the world feels this way, except for guys like the guy in Catch Me If You Can. If you remember that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Total confidence, zero competence. Like he could not have flown the plane. Like everyone would have died. But he had absolute confidence, and no one gave him permission. He felt it himself, and he enjoyed a life that was different than other people. He enjoyed a completely different life because here's the reason why. The moment he walks up to that ticket counter dressed as this airline pilot, and he's super confident,
and he's not a pilot for anyone who hasn't seen the movie,
faking it. It's all pretend. So he walks up to this airline counter, mega confident, but how do most people's brains work? Internally, without knowing it, their brain is saying he would not ever act that way unless he'd been acting this way for a very long time. So our confident behavior carries the weight of the approval of 10,000 people.
10,000 people we've encountered before?
Yeah, so that person assumes you've always acted this way, and thousands of people have reacted to you based on how you're acting right now. So it's not just you and them. Their brain automatically assumes 10,000 people approve of your behavior. So if you act insecure, they think 10,000 people have treated this person like they're insecure before. You're carrying the weight of an entire tribe based on how you act. He walked up there, and those people internally said, no one is going to act like this unless they've always been this way.
So the way that we show up trains people on how they should treat us, because that means that we've been treated this way for a long time before.
Yeah. And it's our level of permission. I want you to always think of confidence as a transfer of permission. I have unlimited permission to act this way. I'm giving you permission as well. So true confidence should always be contagious. So for anybody watching, if you've been around somebody that's been confident before and they made you feel small, that was not confidence. I would venture to say it's not confidence. And if we have somebody faking confidence, like a super posturing kind of person, that makes other people feel small, and it's rooted in insecurity. And then the opposite of that is I'm going to shrink myself to make people around me feel good.
It's the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I'm going to shrink, or I'm going to blow myself up in a balloon. And they're both rooted in the exact same insecurity of I am not enough. I don't have permission. So I'm going to inflate or deflate based on what's going on. And if you've been around somebody who has some crippling social anxiety before, I'm sure. it doesn't make you more comfortable. It makes it more awkward. So, but in that person's unconscious or their subconscious mind, they're saying, if I can kind of like go with the flow a little bit more, I can kind of like take up a little less space, let them make the decisions, everything's going to be okay. It's the opposite. That's why true confidence is contagious, because I'm helping other people just to open up, to be who they are.
So the different sides of the spectrum is deflate, inflate, and the answer is in the middle?
Yes.
Meaning composure.
Yeah. And oftentimes I'll call that collapse and posturing. Well, on the right would be posturing for your viewers. This would be collapse. And kind of like a pendulum, where in the middle we have composure.
And that's true core confidence. That's contagious.
Yeah.
What's the difference between these two, the two extremes on the outside and the one in the middle?
The difference is, how much not enough am I? And that's the first thing I see in other people as a behavior profiler. How much do they feel like they're not enough based on what they're doing, how they're acting, what they're wearing, all of this stuff? They feel like they're not enough. And I never view that as judgment. I just view that as that's going to be an obstacle to our communication. But the composure, if you look at any of the extremes of composure, the collapse, the posturing, they're both rooted in insecurity, and they're both being dishonest about their true intention. They're both being a little bit dishonest. So being in composure just means I feel comfortable in what's going on. Just like the person I gave the platinum card to, their comfort level went up. So if someone's trying to build confidence, the number one mistake, and I've never heard anybody say this, but it is the number one crippling mistake you could make learning confidence or authority, is to view this lens of, I walk in here, we're in a podcast studio right now. If I tried to be really confident, my brain starts viewing this as a lens of, am I more confident than Leon? Am I higher up on some hierarchy than Leon? And the exact moment that somebody starts thinking or worrying about hierarchy and status, you have lost it. Like, it's gone. And if you just think of it in terms of, can I be more comfortable than the people around me? And that's not only going to be contagious, it's going to help them to relax. It's going to help me to relax. And I would say that is a huge breakthrough for anybody that's watching right now. If you can get to a point where all you're worried about is comfort, maybe you compare yourself to other people, because it's an addiction. Start comparing yourself in comfort. Can I move slower than that other person? Can I breathe slower than that other person? Can I get into a place where I'm more comfortable than everyone else in the room? And if that's tough, just start with the speed. Just start with, can I move slower than other people in the room? And make that step one. And that is the first level. And we could just replace the word confidence with comfort, because that's what it truly is when it comes down to it. And it's the comfort and openness to being injured socially.
Just taking time to respond here, just being really confident.
You're trying to outslow me, is what you're doing.
Yes. Is it working? So this is really fascinating. There is a social hierarchy, right? It does exist, but you would agree, right?
Yes,
it does
absolutely.
exist.
Yeah.
And whenever we get into competition mode, am I more confident? Am I more whatever?
Yeah.
That's what really screws us. I've always had an innate sense of that when I play these games, immediately what it assumes is I need to, because I'm not. So I think there's a lot of talk about in the manosphere about alpha males and status and all that.
Yeah.
And I think I always had a sense that is the most beta thing you could do, is just thinking about it that way. Because, and I talked about this in a video, like even just the way we approach certain things always has an echo. So when I tell myself, oh, I'm on a healing journey right now,
Yeah.
the echo that it's repeating to me is because I'm broken, right? And so
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing too. Same thing with, I remember growing up in high school, the girls, when they were 15, they hit a certain age where they tried really hard to be adults and to be really mature. And I always thought that's the most childish thing.
Yeah.
Who wants to be an adult? It's children, right? And so that's what I'm hearing too. So the moment I am worried about my status
or hierarchy,
or position in a hierarchy, I put myself lower. I'm that's the number one killer to confidence.
Yeah. And then somebody watching right now is like, oh yeah, but I have a boss at work. I guarantee you, somebody's thinking that. You know he's in charge, and you don't have to process. You don't have to think about hierarchy and status. You're just thinking about comfort. Can I be more comfortable than my boss? Is he going to think that's insubordinate if I'm just comfortable? No. And the best example of this, like if you want a masterclass in what composure looks like without hierarchy, this sounds so corny to say, but Andy Griffith, I don't know if you've ever seen the show. It's like a show from the 50s, 60s. It's a black and white show initially. It's about a sheriff in a small town called Mayberry. He doesn't even carry a gun, and he has a deputy named Barney Fife, and he's the definition, Andy Griffith, of composure and authority. He has the confidence, the discipline, the leadership, the gratitude, the enjoyment, all of it, perfect. But he has this deputy, Barney Fife, who's irresponsible. He carries a gun, but Andy makes him carry one bullet only. He's allowed one bullet, and he has to keep the bullet in his pocket, separate from the gun. Because this Barney Fife deputy is a perfect example of educating us on what collapsing and posturing looks like. So throughout every episode, this deputy vacillates between, I'm going to posture, I'm going to collapse, and can't kind of find that middle ground. And that happens to a lot of people. Like if I've spent my life in collapse, I'm looking over here to this other end because I want to do the opposite of what I'm doing.
You want to do the posturing because you think that's the answer to collapsing. So how does collapsing, and real quick, just to define or give some examples that people can grasp onto in their own lives, what would be examples of collapsing? What would be examples of posturing?
So collapsing would be, I'm going to make myself smaller so that other people are more comfortable.
People-pleasing
behavior. And this happens a lot with money, with entrepreneurs. When I first got out of the military, I was used to making like $3,000 a month, for 20 years. And I started this business that I didn't think would be successful. And somebody asked me to come speak, and I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And they called me on the phone, and my fee was $5,000 to go do a keynote. And I said, that's all, that covers everything. You don't have to pay for travel or all that. I'll cover all that. And I got on the phone with this guy, and he said, okay, what's your fee to come out here to do a keynote? And I said, it's going to be $5,000 is the keynote fee. And here's what he did on the phone. It sounded like this. He goes, oh, that's all he did. He just made a noise, like a disapproval noise. And I was like, well, but we don't have to do the 5,000. I mean, I could give you a discount. I mean, I could fly out there soon. I could drive, charge you less money. We could probably do 2,500, and it'll work for 2,500. And I almost got to the point in my brain where I'm like willing to tell this guy, I'll give you money to have me come down there and do this, just so I can go do it. And that is collapse. I was in full collapse because I had never dealt with the civilian world. But we also do this socially. Like, I'm going to shrink myself down to make other people feel good, or I'm going to make myself inflated, which is posturing, to make other people feel a little smaller to make myself feel bigger. So they're both a little disingenuous. And you can imagine what it's like with posturing with money. It will be the opposite of collapse. Here's my fees. Actually, you have 24 hours to make a decision. If you don't make a decision and you don't email me, my fee goes up 15% every hour that you delay.
It's the beating your chest.
Yeah.
Making other people feel small.
Yeah.
So that, and both come from insecurity, from feeling not enough.
Yeah.
Interesting. And people, they go from one extreme to the other because they don't know there's a healthy middle.
I think so. And we tend to think in opposites. So like let's say somebody's quitting smoking, and they're like, well, what's the opposite of this? I need to smoke 0 cigarettes. That's a big accomplishment, right? But they look at the opposite instead of the pathway to the center, or the pathway. So if I'm posturing my whole life, the opposite of that is like, I need to stop doing this and become a doormat. or if I'm a doormat and just stop doing this and become a posturing person. And there's so many seminars out there of, I'm not going to name any names, but you can imagine there's like posturing seminar leaders. And then you go to one of those seminars and the entire crowd is full of collapsed people who want to learn how to posture better. It's bizarre. So like, I need to learn how to do that guy on stage, because it's the opposite of what I do. I'm kind of in collapse, and I see this guy posturing on the internet. I need to go learn how to be like that guy, because it's the opposite of me. He's doing the opposite of my problems, which is where I need to be.
Sounds like collapsing is people who want to give control to other people and authority to other people, and posturing are the people who want to take control, and they're less agreeable, whereas the collapsing, they're highly agreeable, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
It also sounds like composure, the difference between composure and the two extremes, which is collapse and posturing, is that in collapse and posturing, you are looking for something outside of yourself. You're looking for validation. You are manipulating. You seek approval. Whereas I think what gets people into composure is not needing anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes someone very powerful.